Hi children, today we are going to learn from the life of Joseph. So yesterday we learned that Joseph was the son of Jacob. Joseph was a beloved son of Jacob because he was born to Rachel whom he loved, and also because he was born in his old age. So because he was the beloved son of Jacob, his brothers were not liking it. Just like sometimes we feel that our parents are being partial, loving more the younger one. The same way, the brothers didn't like Jacob loving Joseph more. Joseph now grows to be a 17-year-old young man, and his work is to help his brothers in the field, to look after the flocks. As I said yesterday, that they were shepherds basically. So Joseph used to go to the fields and help his brothers. The brothers weren't that good. They used to do bad things, bad things when they are together in the field. And therefore Joseph used to come and tell these things that the brothers do to Jacob, because he didn't like it. He didn't like to do those bad things. He could have hidden whatever his brothers used to do, and he could be part of them, but he didn't like the bad things that his brothers did. One day, Jacob, Joseph's father, makes a special beautiful coat for Joseph, and his brothers started to be jealous of him. After some days, Joseph sees a special dream. In that dream, he sees he and his brothers are tying stacks of wheat, and his stack stands up, wherein his brother's stack, it circles around his stack and bows to his stack. Though his brothers were not in good terms, he yet just went and shared with his brothers. And they were angry. They asked if he thinks that he's going to be a king to rule over them. After some days, Joseph gets yet another special dream. And here he sees the sun, the moon, and 11 stars bowing at him. He goes again and shares it with his brothers and with his father. And his brothers didn't like it at all. They refused saying nice things to him. They started to be harsh to him. One day, his brothers went a bit far from their home, nearly 50 miles away, to tend their flocks. And Jacob asks Joseph, who's at home at that time, to go and bring back reports of the brothers, to know if they are fine, to know if the sheep are fine, because Jacob knew that he could trust Joseph to bring the right report. And though the brothers were rude to him, Joseph, on hearing his father's command, says, I will go. He didn't complain, though he had to walk 50 miles, and though his brothers weren't good to him. He agrees and says, I will go. He chooses to obey his father. Joseph therefore leaves, and he walks 15 miles extra because his brothers moved farther away with the flocks. While Joseph was approaching the brothers saw him from far and they decided to kill him. out of anger, out of jealousy. And then they thought, what is the profit in killing? It's better to sell Joseph and get some money out of it. To sell their little honest brother and get money. So they beat him, push him, they hurt him a lot, and they sell him to some traders. Though Joseph pleaded, they didn't mind. The brothers chose not to be honest. Joseph then is being sold to a man called Potiphar. Potiphar is the captain guard of Pharaoh. So Potiphar takes Joseph and he works as a slave in his house. Though this is a big blow for Joseph, being the favorite son of a wealthy father to becoming a slave, he was honest in his work. And that was because God was with him. He was successful in what all he did. Potiphar realizes that Joseph was successful in everything he did. Potiphar was blessed by Joseph when Joseph worked in Potiphar's fields. And then Potiphar decides to make Joseph to be in charge of his house, to be nearly equal to Potiphar, in charge of everything in the house, in such a way that Potiphar was only thinking of what he eats every day. Joseph worked with sincere heart, and he was successful in everything he did because God was with him. So he's now a young, good-looking man with good characteristics. Potiphar's wife therefore gets attracted to Joseph. She calls Joseph one day to be her boyfriend. But Joseph refuses. And this happens every day. Potiphar's wife would look for a chance when Potiphar wouldn't be at home, and she would call Joseph, and then Joseph would refuse. And he said, "How can I sin against God?" He thought about what God would think. Sometimes in our lives, we come in situations wherein we have the freedom to choose right and wrong. Sometimes there are things that comes in the TV screens, that comes in the media, which you know that is not right for you to see. And when it comes in the TV, maybe you just change the channel thinking, "Oh, what would my father think of me? Or what would my mother think of me?" And therefore you choose to do it or to see it when no one sees. But here we see Joseph saying that he cannot sin against God. He was concerned about what God would think of him. he could do whatever he wanted because he didn't have anyone he knew around him. Potiphar is not at that place, and his parents or no one is there. It's fully his choice, but he chose to do the right thing. And this happens every day. Now one day, again, Potiphar's wife looks for a chance to see when she could get Joseph. So she looks for a time when Potiphar is not there at home, when parents are not there at home. There are chances. So she too looks for a chance. And when Potiphar is not there at home, she goes and grabs Joseph's coat. You know what Joseph do? Joseph leaves the coat there and runs out of home. He leaves the coat there because he didn't even want her to touch him, or he didn't even want to touch her. So, because the coat was in the hand of Potiphar's wife, he just leaves it off and gets out of the house. He was faithful to his master, and he was faithful to the person whom he could not see, his God. Now Potiphar comes back. His wife twists the story, telling that he was behind her. Potiphar believes it and takes him to prison. It was a prison where Pharaoh's employers from the palace were put in if they did something wrong. So there also we can see that though he was put in prison and though he was right, still he was put in prison. We can see that he becomes a pleased prisoner for the guards there. They are pleased with Joseph, that they make him in charge. And that was all because God was with them. So two of the Pharaoh's employers gets a dream, and we see Joseph interpreting the dream, and it turns to be right. And then they leave the prison. Still, Joseph is in prison for 1 year and then 2 years, faithfully serving the masters in the prison. Then one day Pharaoh gets a dream, and he comes to know that there is an interpreter in the prison. He calls for Joseph, and then Joseph is asked to shave and clean his body, putting clean clothes, and then he's brought in front of Pharaoh. He interprets Pharaoh's dream, and Pharaoh realizes that God's spirit was in Joseph, and that God made Joseph wise. So he decides to keep Joseph as the prime minister to him. And then in the end we see that literally Joseph's brothers bow down to Joseph, and his father too sees him to be the in charge of Egypt. And therefore, the dream given to Joseph was fulfilled. So, in this story, we learned that becoming truthful or honest in your actions may cost you to suffer, but in the end, you will be successful because God will be with you. Thank you.